Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. So this is our final episode of 2024. The next time I see you will be 2025. And we obviously, like I said, to lead the show, we're going to do a lot more college hoops going forward because obviously, look, college football is ramping down. Many of you know me specifically for college hoops. And so what I wanted to do was just take a few minutes to wrap our final show of 2024 and talk about what I believe to be the biggest stories in college basketball going into 2025. In other words, what are the biggest stories between now and April when a national champion is crowned? Not going to talk about AJ DeBonsa, not going to talk about the Boozer twins, not even going to talk about what I assume will be a wild portal season in April and May. But instead, I want to give you what I believe to be the 10 biggest stories in college basketball. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize. The graphics are lacking a little bit today. Producer Matt will be back for our show on Thursday, recapping the college football playoff. But let's go ahead and dive into, in my opinion, the 10 biggest stories in college football, in college basketball heading into 2025. The first one, number one story in college basketball heading into 2025 is the SEC set to be the best conference we have ever seen in college basketball. Okay. So I've talked about this quite a bit. I think anyone who loves college basketball is kind of monitoring this story, but the SEC is trending right now to potentially be the best conference we have ever had in college basketball history. It sounds hyperbolic. I promise you it is not, okay? The bottom line is if you just look at the raw numbers, it's incredible. First of all, new AP poll just came out a few hours ago. There are currently 10 of the 25 teams in the top 25 are from the SEC, 5 of the top 10. Oh, by the way, 7 of the top 13 teams all in the SEC. It's also worth noting, by the way, we put up the stat a few weeks ago. Jared Burson, ESPN Stats and Info, said that the SEC had already set a record for most wins against ranked teams in the out-of-conference portion of the schedule by one conference. They are beating and destroying everybody. But I think this is the most telling stat on how good this league is. And it's good to me, top, bottom, and middle. I think that's the difference, right? There's a lot of conferences that have a good top 2 or 3. There's some that have a top 5 or 6. The SEC literally right now, 1 through 16 is awesome. And this is the stat that I think is going to blow you away. Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology. How about this? Of the 16 teams in the SEC, 13 were projected to make the NCAA tournament. But here's actually the crazy part. Vanderbilt was in the first 4 out. LSU was in the next 4 out, meaning that 15 of the 16 SEC teams are basically either comfortably in the field, or basically a win away from being in Joe Lunardi's next bracketology. So it is incredible. It is unreal. It is unprecedented. I don't think the SEC is going to end up with 13. Certainly don't think they're going to end up with 15, but do I think 11 or 12 is absolutely in play? Of course. 11, of course, is the record as far as I can tell. Big East 2011, shout out Kemba Walker, only conference to get 11 in one NCAA tournament. Let's keep it going. The number 2 story, in my opinion, heading into college hoops into 2024, 25, really 25, is basically, can anybody beat Auburn? Okay, and if you haven't been following college hoops religiously so far this season, Auburn, in my opinion, is by far the best team in college basketball in 2024, 2025 right now, okay? So as we record here, Tennessee is the number 1 team in the country, but Auburn is sitting at 11-1 in college basketball, and this is all you need to know about Auburn. Their only loss was at Duke in a game where they actually led early in the game, couldn't hold on. Iowa State was the only other game that was close, but here's the crazy part with Auburn. Look at some of the scores of their other games. Beat North Carolina. North Carolina's pretty good by 13 points. Beat Memphis, a top 25 team right now, by 24. Beat Ohio State by 38. Remember, Ohio State then beat Kentucky a week later. Beat Purdue by 18. Beat Houston. This team is beating the crap out of teams. They are dominant. Now, look, obviously in the SEC, they're not going to go 17-1 in league play or anything like that. The league is too tough. But I do think you look at this team, they are, in my opinion, by far the best team in college basketball. I think they're trending towards an SEC regular season title, a number 1 seed, Janai Broome, National Player of the Year. Credit to Auburn. Let me just read those numbers to you again. Beat Memphis by 24, currently in the top 25. Beat Ohio State by 38, Purdue by 18, North Carolina by 13. Credit to the Auburn Tigers. Auburn was the Maui Invitational champion. Let's move on to number 3, which is UConn's pursuit of a national championship, a 3rd straight title, a three-peat realistic? So why I lump Auburn and UConn together, of course, they both played in the Maui Invitational. UConn goes 0-3, Auburn goes 3-0. But it's also worth noting with UConn on the mainland is 10-0. UConn also outside of the Maui Invitational is 10-0. So was it a bad couple days in Hawaii? Is this a flawed team? Whatever. Let's go ahead and discuss, because it is worth noting, since they got back from Maui, this is a team that is 6-0, 2 Big East wins already, 2 true road wins at Texas, at Butler, and also beat Gonzaga on a neutral and beat Baylor at home. And so when I look at UConn, listen, I will say this. I don't think they should be deemed one of the favorites necessarily right now. I think when I look at UConn, they are a different kind of team than the last couple of years. Last couple of years, they were so gifted offensively. Jordan Hawkins 2-3 years ago, Adama Sanogo, Tristan Newton, Donovan Clingan last year, Cam Spencer. This team to me is more of an old school Hurley team. They're great on defense. They play really hard. And that's been the thing about the last 2 years. They've played really hard with skill. This team, I don't think, is quite as skilled, but they're starting to play with that Hurley toughness to them. And I think they're going to go on a run here. You look at the Big East. The Big East, once you get past UConn and Marquette, is pretty sketchy. St. John's is 11-2, but even in their wins, they kind of always start off slow. They beat Providence. They had to rally in their Big East, or their second Big East game against Providence right before Christmas. And so it's not to say that St. John's is bad. It's just to say that I think they're flawed. I think Georgetown's actually kind of an interesting team right now. Georgetown, Marquette, St. John's, UConn, all 4 of those teams are 2-0 in league play. But I just bring it up because I think UConn is very much going to be in position. I think it's going to be a little back against the wall. I don't think they're one of the 10 best teams or anything I've seen, but I trust Dan Hurley. I trust the program. They're getting better every game. It's worth noting, I think it's a little early to look at quad 1, quad 2, quad 3 wins, but they have as many quad 1 wins as anybody in college basketball. So credit to UConn. They're turning things around, even if I think it's still a little early for a potential three-peat legitimate conversation. Let's keep it going with number 4. Listen, 2 guys that will, fair or not, and I know both fan bases are going to be mad at me for doing this, but will be forever tied in history. John Calipari and Mark Pope. How do both teams end their how do both guys end their first season at their new schools? Mark Pope, of course, took over for John Calipari at Kentucky, and John Calipari is at Arkansas. Now, it is worth noting, Arkansas is playing on Monday night against Oakland of all teams, so this could be a very outdated segment very quickly. But let's assume Arkansas wins. Both teams will enter SEC play, very likely sitting at 11-2 overall. Kentucky, by the way, plays New Year's Eve day against Brown at home. So basically, both teams have one game left heading into league play. Both teams very likely will be, hopefully, if they're not 11-2 going into league play, we're going to have a bonus pod here, because that means one of them would have either lost to Oakland or Brown. But I think what this really says to me is I'm just curious to see how both teams finish the season. To Mark Pope's credit, listen, I think it's gone as well as you possibly could have expected. I don't think you could have expected much better than 10-2. You beat Gonzaga, you beat Duke. You've really played one bad game. That was the Ohio State game right before the new year, or right before the Christmas break. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying it's a reality. And then from Arkansas, I think a lot of people threw a lot of dirt on that program early. But since they got back Jonas Adu, they've been a different team. Beat Michigan at Madison Square Garden. The last couple of games, they have basically destroyed teams. And I think it is worth noting, they are a different team when they have big men in the middle that could actually play. Trevin Brazile was hurt. Jonas Adu was hurt. The last 3 games that they have played, They beat Michigan on a neutral. They beat Central Arkansas by 25, and then they beat North Carolina A&T by 28. And so I'm not saying we should throw a parade for beating North Carolina, A&T, Central Arkansas, and Michigan on a neutral, but they do feel like a different team with Jonas Adu. Fascinated to see how these two teams respond and bounce back. By the way, interesting SEC openers for both. Arkansas goes on the road to the number 1 ranked Tennessee Vols to open SEC play on Saturday. Kentucky will play Florida at home. Florida is undefeated as of right now. That will be an 11 a.m. Eastern start time at Rupp Arena on Saturday. So make sure you get your coffee for that one. Number 5 story of college hoops heading into 2025. Cooper Flagg. I'm just really interested what becomes of the Cooper Flagg narrative, okay? First off, having a pretty good freshman year. He no longer leads his team in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. Only points, rebounds, assists, and blocks. So clearly he's fallen apart. But in all seriousness, like I think about the Cooper Flagg story, I'll be transparent. I kind of thought this was going to be Zion-esque in terms of interest, especially after he played with that Team USA select team, was playing against the Olympic team this summer, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, etc. I don't really feel like we've had that moment yet. I think you could argue Cooper Flagg's biggest moment was the turnover against Kentucky late in the game, the 2 turnovers late in the game against Kentucky, including the one that Mark Pope told you was going to happen. And so I just bring it up because he's a great player, but I don't feel like he has had that moment yet. And I'm curious if and when it comes, because now you're heading into an ACC that transparently, ACC ain't very good right now. ACC, I know Lunardi has 5 teams in, but you get past Duke, it's a lot of question marks. Clemson's okay, but they've already lost 3 games. Pitt's okay, but do we really trust them? North Carolina, I actually think, is playing better, but they're sitting at 8-5 right now. Louisville's all sorts of banged up. Intriguing game, by the way, for Duke. Second game of ACC play this week. They will play New Year's Eve day against Virginia Tech. Then they go to SMU. Remember, SMU, of course, is in the ACC. Andy Enfield is the head coach, left USC, which led the whole trickle-down effect. Musselman goes to USC. Cal goes to Arkansas. Pope goes to Kentucky. SMU quietly sitting at 10-2, 11-2 right now, heading into their New Year's or their game on Saturday against Duke. So that'll be a really interesting one. But I'm just curious, like, when does it really click for Duke? When does it really click for Cooper Flagg? Does he have that super viral moment where it's like, okay, this is his moment in college hoops? Curious to see if and when it comes. Number 6. So Cooper Flagg is going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. People are going to try to argue otherwise. I think it's going to be Cooper Flagg. He's the youngest player in college basketball, and he's going to be a first-team All-American. But the number 2 and number 3 picks both might miss the NCAA tournament. This to me is very interesting. Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey are both at Rutgers, and Rutgers is kind of struggling right now. They're at 7-5. They lost to Princeton about a week ago. Remember, they lost at Kennesaw State. That was a return game for Ace Bailey, who is from the Atlanta area. And so when I look at this season, I think it's a couple interesting narratives about those two guys. They choose a different school, a unique school. Obviously, Dylan Harper, his ties to Rutgers, his older brother played there. But what makes it interesting is, what if these two guys miss the NCAA tournament? 1, I don't think it impacts their draft stock. It doesn't. But 2, I'm just curious, They chose the non-traditional path of not going to Duke, not going to Kentucky, not going to Arizona, not playing for John Calipari, not playing for Hubert Davis. Does that change guys' decisions in the future? I know AJ DeBonsa is going to BYU, but I think that's a little bit of a unique one-off situation there. But does it change people's decisions to do this? But 2, is this really a way to build teams in college basketball in 2024, 2025? Because you have 2 lottery picks, no doubt about it, lottery picks, potential top 5 picks, likely top 5 picks, and you're probably going to miss the NCAA tournament. So I think that's just something to watch going forward. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey are uniquely gifted players, but I think both right now are trending to miss the tournament. Rutgers is in the Big Ten, number 7 on my list. Who's the best team in the Big Ten? 18 teams in that league right now, and I'm going to be quick through these next few ones because I got to get out of here. Actually, I got to go do Fox Sports Radio, but I bring it up because who's the best team in the Big Ten right now? Oregon dominated out of conference play, beat Alabama to win that Players Era Invitational. They're really good. UCLA, I just saw in person against Gonzaga. I was at that UCLA game in Inglewood on Saturday. Awesome game. I think UCLA might actually be the best team. Purdue's pretty good, but I'm not really sold on them. They had a great win against Alabama at home, but on a neutral against Auburn, they lost. At Marquette, they lost. I don't think this is a team that's going like, what they go 18-2 last year. I don't think they're going like 16-4, 15-5 this year. So I'm just curious, who's the best team? Is it UCLA? I think it might be Illinois. Illinois to me is a very fascinating team. Beat Arkansas in the out of conference play. Easily could have beaten Tennessee, which was number one and is number one in the country. Illinois to me is interesting. UCLA is interesting, as I believe those are the top two teams that I've seen in the Big Ten. Wisconsin with John Tanji playing very well as well. Number 8, staying in the Big Ten. Mike Woodson. Is this it for Mike Woodson? Okay, so Mike Woodson in Indiana. So I mentioned there's 13 teams from the SEC in Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology. The Big Ten has 10. Indiana is not one of them. Why is Indiana not one of them? Well, they're 10-3 overall, but their 3 losses: destroyed by Louisville, destroyed by Gonzaga, destroyed by Nebraska on the road. Their best win in the out-of-conference portion of play, maybe South Carolina, maybe Providence with a banged-up team without Bryce Hopkins. So I just bring it up because they don't have a great resume going into Big Ten play, and it feels like things are starting to get a little weird for Mike Woodson, okay? Remember, this was, if you missed this story over the weekend, wild story. This is where we're missing producer Matt, because I'd love to get this picture up. But so Umar Ballo, literally like 7 foot, 280 pounds, was seen at a bar at 1 a.m. The night before a game on Sunday against Winthrop. Why it's interesting, he did not play against Winthrop. Did DMP coach's decision? Mike Woodson would not address it after. I'll be honest, it's kind of hard to miss a 7 foot, 280 pound guy at the bar. And I can tell you, Indiana fans, I was kind of surprised by the reaction on social media. They're like, this is an unserious program. We're paying all these guys all sorts of NIL money. They're not taking this crap seriously. So I just bring it up because I think Mike Woodson could be on the hot seat. I think he's definitely on the hot seat. If he misses the tournament, he's out. I think even if he makes the tournament, but it's like a weird, 17-11. Well, it can't be 17-11 because, whatever, 22-12 or something, loses in the first round of the Big Ten tournament, loses in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I think there's a possibility that he could be gone. But Mike Woodson, interesting story there. That's number 8. Number 9, just who's next in terms of the coaches that are retiring. Woodson, I think, would get fired, but Jim Larinaga just retired. Tony Bennett retired before the season. We didn't do a Jim Larinaga story. Listen, I thought it was kind of tacky that he blamed NIL. It's like, dude, your program was kind of the king of NIL for a while. Now you're blaming NIL. Didn't love that. But I just bring it up because who's next? Mark Few, I'm hearing increasingly, is just kind of like, don't really love the state of college basketball right now. My team isn't dominating. Could he be next? I think there's a possibility that maybe Leonard Hamilton, after what happened this week, could be next. I think somebody big could be out soon. Maybe Tom Izzo. I don't know. And then number 10 is just, what are we not ready for? Is it an NIL story like this? Is it a transfer portal story? I don't know, but I cannot wait to find